As feared, the death of Justice Antonin Scalia has literally tied up our Supreme Court. Today, the High Court split 4-4 in a decision over a challenge to public sector unions collecting dues from non-members. That means the prior decision of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals remains intact, and that decision upheld fee collections by those unions. To talk about it, let's welcome back Andy McCarthy, former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, now a Policy Fellow at the National Review Institute. Now, Andy, during the oral argument for this case in January, many observers believed the court would strike down this dues requirement existing in 23 of our states. So did Scalia's death kill any chance that we'll see the type of needed reform anytime soon?
Yeah, I think it did, J.D. Justice Scalia, I think in this case, would clearly have been on the side of not requiring dues to be paid by non-members of the union. So their strategy obviously was right to push this case because they had a good expectation that they'd have a majority ruling out of the court. So it's, I think it teaches us that elections absolutely matter, and in this coming election, the public is going to have a choice about what side and what president they want to have choosing their next Supreme Court justice at a time when the Supreme Court really does hang in the balance in terms of its ideological direction.
But in the interim, what other cases are likely to deadlock, and will that basically maintain an advantage for the left in the courts?
It does maintain an advantage for the left, J.D., because the court, in my view, is less a court now than a super legislature. And the four liberals on the court vote as a block. And it really doesn't matter what the law, what the legal outcome should be based on what the precedents say. They work from where does the left want this case to come out, and then they work backwards to rationalize it. They don't try to work through the legal principles to get to a conclusion. So to the extent that the left will always vote, those four justices will always vote as a block or reliably vote as a block, and the conservatives won't, they're obviously at a big advantage.
And it's why the conservative Senate Republicans need to hang tough and not take up any nomination from President Obama. Andy McCarthy, we thank you for your insights and analysis. Now it's time for The Way You See It, your comments via social media. A lot of you wrote in about our segment last night with health editor Nick Tate about the rise in TB cases here in our country, especially in border states. Here's what Kit had to say. Your show last night warned the American public about the threat of TB brought in by immigrants. The immigrants will not only cost us money to support them, but they'll be costing Americans their lives. Wake up, fellow citizens, before it's too late. The 2016 presidential race remains a hot topic. You have been writing in about it, and John did last night, who's undecided. He writes, both Hillary and the Donalds scare me silly, yet even more disconcerting are how many Americans find them worthy to be called the president of the greatest nation on earth. God help us. A lot of us have been saying that for the last 7 years. Bill has a concern about the establishment stealing the GOP nomination at the convention in Cleveland. He writes, I hope that the Trump and Cruz folks know that if there's not a winner by the second ballot at the GOP convention, the only way either of them will get the nomination is if whoever's in second place drops out and gives his support to the other. Then the one dropping out must become the other's choice for BP. All right. Glenna questions Ted Cruz and his response to the allegations of infidelity. She writes, why do people believe Ted Cruz is telling the truth about cheating on his wife? Donald Trump may be a lot of things, but a liar he is not. That title goes to Ted Cruz. And finally, we hear from Kenneth, who writes in about a perceived bias in the media, calling out a certain host. He says, I get so sick of liberal biased media outlets. When I hear you guys spewing anti-Trump gobbledygook, it makes my blood pressure rise. Stop regurgitating the Fox News BS about Trump. That's our guy. J.D. Hayworth, take off your politician hat and get behind us Americans with our choice. Hey, Kenneth, glad you have a choice. I have one too in the privacy of marking my ballot. Until then, I'll talk about things on my mind as a commentator, not as an ex-congressman. Stay brave, stay free, stay tuned. We'll see you tomorrow.